Jaxon O'Connor didn't believe in fate until the day he walked into Fresh Press Dry Cleaning and nearly walked straight into her. "Whoa, sorry," she said, stumbling back with a hanger full of pressed suits. "I didn't see you there." He blinked. For a second, the world genuinely paused. Not in some cheesy, slow-motion way. Just enough for his brain to catch up to what he was seeing. She wasn't in some fancy dress or anything. In fact, she was in a navy Fresh Press uniform, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail, a pen behind her ear, and a tiny wrinkle between her brows like she was always thinking too hard. He had no idea why he couldn't look away. "It's fine," he said quickly, his voice smooth out of habit. "I should have watched where I was going." She smiled small, polite, but it hit him like a punch to the chest. "I'll grab your order," she said, stepping behind the counter. Jaxon adjusted the cuff of his blazer, suddenly feeling overdressed in his tailored charcoal suit. He glanced around at the tacky posters advertising 24-hour service and a "buy 4 get 1 free" coupon taped to the register. He didn't even live near this place. His usual cleaner was undergoing a remodel, and his assistant had sent him here as a temporary fix. He had planned to be in and out in less than 2 minutes. And yet, "Here," she said, returning with 5 perfectly pressed dress shirts and 2 suits. "Jaxon O'Connor, right?" He nodded, startled she remembered his name. "I just started a few weeks ago," she explained, like she'd read his mind. "I've been learning the regulars." "I'm not exactly a regular," he said, taking the hangers from her. "But maybe I should be." She tilted her head. "That sounds like a line." He laughed. "It's not. I'm just surprised I haven't seen you before." She looked at him for a beat, like she was trying to figure him out. "Well, now you have." He hesitated. "What's your name?" "Arielle. Arielle Hart." Arielle. It fit her. Strong but soft. Direct but not cold. "Nice to meet you, Arielle." "You too, Jaxon." She said it like she already knew him. Not the way people usually said his name carefully, like they were calculating his net worth in real time. He left the dry cleaner with his clothes in one hand and her name echoing in his head. Jaxon had meetings all day, 3 in the office, one with a potential investor, and a dinner with the board, but between presentations and contracts, he found himself thinking about Arielle. About the fact that she didn't seem to care who he was. That she hadn't asked what he did, or why his shirts were custom stitched with his initials. He found himself returning the next week with only 1 shirt to drop off. And the week after that with a single tie. "Really?" Arielle raised an eyebrow as she scanned in his lone tie. "You drove here for this?" "I was in the area," he lied. She gave him a look that said she didn't believe him for a second. He grinned. "Okay, maybe I wasn't. But I figured it needed pressing. Or maybe," she said dryly, "you just wanted to see if I remembered your name again." He liked her. Liked the way she challenged him without even trying. Liked that she didn't fall all over herself like most people did when they figured out who he was. Of course, she didn't know who he was. And for some reason, he didn't want to ruin that just yet. He wasn't hiding it, exactly. He just liked that when she looked at him, she saw a guy named Jaxon, not the CEO of O'Connor Holdings, not one of Manhattan's most eligible bachelors according to some ridiculous magazine article last year. Just him. "So, Arielle," he said one afternoon, leaning on the counter as she tagged someone else's suit. "What do you do when you're not fighting with steam presses and plastic wrap?" She glanced up. "You mean after I finish my double shift and eat dinner standing up in my kitchen?" Jaxon blinked. "Double shift?" "Yup. 2 jobs. This one and a part-time gig at the bookstore down the block." She looked up. "You asking because you care or because you're bored?" "Both," he said honestly. She laughed. "At least you're honest." "Always." She nodded slowly, watching him. "Fine. I like art. Drawing mostly. I've been sketching since I was a kid." It's a side thing. Doesn't pay the bills. He wanted to ask more. He wanted to see her work. He wanted to know why she looked a little tired beneath her smile, and what it would take to make that smile real. But instead, he just said, "You're talented then." She shrugged. "Not enough to quit my day jobs. Maybe not yet." Their hands brushed when she handed him his receipt. By week 5, he wasn't pretending anymore. He came, even when he didn't have anything to clean. He brought her coffee once. She pretended to hate it. "This is too fancy," she said, sipping anyway. "You're welcome. You realize this costs more than I make in an hour? Then I should have brought you two." She looked at him like he was an idiot, but her cheeks turned a little pink. He liked that too. One afternoon, she surprised him. "I Googled you," she said, not looking up from the register. He froze. "Didn't think I'd figure it out?" "I know. I guess I hoped you wouldn't care." "I don't," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "But I had to make sure you weren't a serial killer." He laughed, then turned serious. "And? You're not. Just a billionaire with a habit of showing up to a dry cleaner like it's a first date." He stepped closer. "Maybe I wanted to be." She didn't flinch. "You're way out of my league, Jaxon." "I don't believe in leagues." "Well, I do." He leaned in. "So tell me what it takes to get into yours." Arielle didn't answer right away. But she didn't step back either. "You'd have to prove you're not just playing." "I'm not." "Okay," she said finally. "Then show me." He took her hand. Just a brush of his fingers against hers. She let him. And for the first time in a long time, Jaxon O'Connor wasn't planning a merger or an acquisition. He was falling hard. Arielle didn't show up for her shift on Friday. Jaxon hadn't planned to stop by. He told himself that 3 times already, but his car somehow coasted to a stop in front of Fresh Press anyway. He stepped inside, feigning surprise when the bell above the door jingled. But the girl behind the counter wasn't Arielle. It was some college kid with pink headphones around her neck and chipped nail polish. She didn't look up until he cleared his throat. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. "Is Arielle working today?" The girl popped her gum. "Nah," she called out. He frowned. "Is she okay?" She shrugged. "Dunno. Said something came up." "You want to leave something?" He shook his head. "No, thanks." Outside, he leaned against the hood of his car, one hand gripping his keys. Something came up. The words rolled around in his head, sour and vague. Arielle didn't strike him as the type to bail on work without a reason, and definitely not without a fight. It wasn't like her to vanish. She was steady. Predictable, in the best way. He climbed into the back seat. "Back to the office, sir?" his driver asked. "No. Take me to the corner of Lexington and East 72nd. He didn't glance up as the car pulled away from the curb. He just stared out the window, jaw tight. He had no idea if she'd be at the bookstore, but it was the only other place he knew to find her. When they arrived, he spotted her through the tall glass windows before he even stepped out. She was shelving hardcovers, her hair tucked into a loose braid, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. She reached for a high shelf and winced. He was through the door in seconds. "Arielle." She turned, startled. Her expression flickered with something unreadable. "You found me," she said quietly. "You called out. I got worried." "I'm fine. Just bruised a rib." His brow furrowed. "What happened?" "I slipped on my stairs. It's not broken, just sore. I didn't want to deal with steam machines and lint rollers when I can barely lift my arm." He stepped closer. "You should have told me. We don't exactly text," she said. "Didn't think my rib status was urgent information. You could have been seriously hurt." "I wasn't." He took a breath. "Let me take you home." "I'm working." "You're injured." She gave him a look. "I can shelve books. I'm not made of glass." His gaze didn't waver. You shouldn't be on your feet. I need the hours, Jaxon. Dropping a shift means rent gets tight, and I don't have the luxury of choosing between income and discomfort. I'll cover your shift. She folded her arms, wincing slightly. That's not how this works. Why not? Because I'm not your project. He stared at her, stunned. Is that what you think? I think you're used to fixing things by throwing money at them. And I'm not something you can fix. He stepped back, just slightly. I didn't mean it like that. I know, she said after a pause. But this thing between us, it's already tilted. You live in a world with drivers and doormen. I live in one with overdue electric bills. That difference doesn't vanish just because you're charming. I never said it did. She looked down. I like you, Jaxon. But I don't want to be a footnote in your life. Some girl you met while slumming it in a dry cleaner. You're not a footnote, he said, voice low. You're the only part that feels real right now. Her eyes met his, uncertain. I'm not asking for forever, he said. Just dinner. One night where we don't pretend the world around us matters more than what's right in front of us. She looked at her boss behind the counter, then back at him. Fine. One dinner. But I pick the restaurant. He smiled. Deal. That night, she chose a Cuban hole in the wall on a quiet street in Harlem. The paint was peeling, the menus were laminated, and the food was better than anything he'd eaten in the last 6 months. You're not allergic to spice, are you? She asked, setting down a glass of guava juice. I think I'll survive. He tried the ropa vieja and nearly choked. You're sweating, she said, amused. It's flavorful. It's fire. He laughed, wiping his forehead. Okay, you win. The waitress brought flan for dessert, and Arielle leaned back in her chair, watching him. So what's it like? She asked. Being you? He hesitated. Lonely. She blinked. Everyone wants something, he continued. A favor, a job, a shortcut. Half the time, I don't know who's real. And the other half? I pretend I don't care. She nodded slowly. That must get exhausting. It does. Maybe you need more flan in your life. He smiled. Maybe I do. After dinner, they walked without speaking. The city buzzed around them, cars honking, music spilling from open windows, the scent of roasted peanuts wafting from a cart nearby. She stopped at a corner. This is me. He looked up. Her building was old, with ivy climbing the side and an iron gate that creaked when she opened it. Thank you for dinner, she said. You're thanking me? You nearly incinerated my taste buds. She laughed, then winced again. He caught her arm. You should rest. No more climbing ladders. She nodded. Good night, Jaxon. Before he could think better of it, he leaned forward and kissed her cheek. It was brief, but she didn't pull away. When she disappeared behind the door, he stood there for a long moment, staring up at the building. For the first time in years, he didn't want to go home. Not to his penthouse, not to his infinity pool, not to the skyline view. He just wanted more time with her. And he wasn't going to waste it. Arielle didn't show up for her shift the next night either, but this time, Jaxon knew why. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor of her tiny apartment, surrounded by sketchbooks, charcoal pencils, and a half-eaten container of lo mein. Her ribs still ached when she twisted too quickly, but the pain dulled under the rhythm of her pencil strokes scraping across paper. He knocked. She opened the door barefoot, a graphite smudge across her cheek. Didn't expect you. You didn't answer your buzzer. I was drawing. He glanced down at her fingers smudged with charcoal, nails uneven, a faint line of ink trailing up her wrist like a secret map. You're covered in art. She stepped aside to let him in. Sorry, it's a mess. I wasn't expecting company. He didn't care. The apartment was small, barely held together, but it was filled with color. Canvases leaned against the walls like silent witnesses, and the room smelled like cinnamon and turpentine. It was more alive than any gallery he'd ever walked through. You did all of these? He asked, stopping in front of a canvas near the window. Yeah. He turned to her. You're incredible. She shrugged, but her mouth twitched with something close to pride. You didn't come all the way up here to flatter me. No, he admitted. I came because I've been thinking about you. And because I wanted to see what your world looks like. She raised an eyebrow. And what do you think so far? I think it's real. And rare. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely. You sure you're not just fascinated with the novelty of it? If I was, I'd have walked out 10 minutes ago. She studied him, then moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside. You ever wanted something so badly, but you knew the second you reached for it, you'd probably drop it? All the time. She turned. Then you understand why I haven't let you kiss me yet. I wasn't going to tonight. No? I was going to ask you to come with me to the annual O'Connor Foundation Gala. She blinked. You mean the one that's always in the papers? With the red carpet and the 6-figure violinists? That's the one. Why? Because I want you there. Not as a date for show. Not as some charity case. I want you next to me because you belong there, whether or not you believe it. She laughed under her breath. I don't have a dress that belongs in that kind of room. I'll take care of that. I'm not letting you spend thousands on a gown I'll wear once. He walked over to her and held out a small envelope. Then let me give you this instead. She opened it slowly. Inside was a card that read, Arielle Hart. Featured artist. O'Connor Foundation Gala. Her fingers tightened on the paper. You're kidding. Every year, we auction off art to raise money. This year, I want your work on those walls. It'll be seen by collectors, curators, people who can do more than just hang it in their penthouses. People who can open doors. Her throat worked around a response. You did this without asking me. I did. And I'll take it back if you hate it. But I saw your work, and I know what it's worth. The world should see it too. She looked down at the card again. What if no one bids? They will. And if they don't? Then I'll buy every piece myself. She shook her head. That's not the point. I know, he said gently. But I believe in you, Arielle. Whether or not you believe in yourself yet. She stared at him for a long moment. What do I have to do? Just show up. The rest is already taken care of. She lifted her chin. Fine. But only if I pick the piece I submit. Deal. 2 days later, she stood in front of a mirror in a showroom tucked inside a building that required a keycard just to reach the elevator. The dress was midnight blue, simple in silhouette but rich in texture, with a low back and delicate beading that glinted like starlight under the recessed lighting. She turned slowly. It's too much. It's perfect, said the stylist. You'll stop traffic. I don't want to stop traffic. I just want to be able to breathe. Behind her, Jaxon leaned against the doorway, watching her through the mirror. You look like yourself. Just the version the world hasn't met yet. She turned. And what version are you tonight? He pulled on the cuffs of his tuxedo. The one who finally has something worth showing off. Later that night, the gala buzzed with champagne and flashbulbs. Arielle gripped her small clutch tighter than necessary as they stepped into the ballroom. Breathe, he whispered, guiding her hand to his arm. You say that like it's easy. You've got this. The room was glittering, filled with people who had never once worried about the cost of laundry detergent. Her painting was mounted between 2 others, luminous and unapologetically hers, an abstract portrait of a woman climbing out of a subway grate, city lights twisting around her like vines. An older woman in a sequined cape paused in front of it. This piece has teeth. Arielle blinked. Thank you. You're the artist? She nodded. Brave work. I want it. Arielle's lips parted. You do? The woman glanced at the program. Arielle Hart. I'll be watching your name. When she walked away, Arielle turned to Jaxon. Did you pay her to say that? I've never met her in my life. By the end of the night, her painting had sold for more than 5 times the average bid. Jaxon led her to the rooftop terrace afterward, where Manhattan glittered like a spilled jewelry box below them. "You know this doesn't change anything," she said quietly. "I know. I'm still me. That's who I want." She looked up at him, the wind pulling strands of hair from her braid. "You're not afraid I'll ruin your image?" "My image could use some ruining." She stepped closer. "Just so we're clear, I still don't believe in fairy tales." "Good," he said. "Then let's make something better." He kissed her. Not tentative. Not rushed. Just right. And for the first time, Arielle didn't try to pull away. Arielle stood in front of the gallery window, staring at her own name etched into the temporary display plaque. It wasn't the gala anymore, this was a real exhibit. A month had passed since that night in the ballroom, and the momentum hadn't stopped. Calls had come in, not from Jackson's people, but from curators, agents, even a collector who wanted to commission a new series. Her art was finally being seen. Behind her, the door creaked open. "You're early," she said, not turning. "I wanted to see it before the crowd showed up," Jaxon replied, his voice warm with quiet pride. She faced him. He was in a dark coat, collar turned up against the wind, hair still slightly damp from the rain outside. The look in his eyes was different tonight, calm, certain. She hadn't seen him this still since they'd met. "You okay?" she asked. He stepped closer, gaze fixed on her. "I've been thinking about something." "That sounds dangerous." He smiled at that, but it didn't reach his eyes. "My board wants me to move the company's headquarters to London." Her heart skipped. "Wait, what?" "I've been pushing back. Delaying meetings. Avoiding the final call. But the truth is, it's a smart move. We're expanding heavily in Europe, and they want me there to oversee it. Permanently." She stared at him, her throat tightening. "When would you go?" "End of the quarter." "Unless I say no?" She folded her arms, not to be defensive, but to hold herself together. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I don't want to leave without you." Arielle blinked. "You want me to move to London?" "I want you wherever I am. But not like a secret in the back of my mind. I want you beside me. Every damn day." She looked down at her hands. "My work is just starting here." "I know. I'm not asking you to give any of it up. We can split time. Or build something that works for both of us. I'll fly back and forth. I'll make it work." She shook her head slowly. "You've already made everything else work for me. The gallery, the exposure. I need to know where I stand when things aren't effortless." "What are you afraid of?" Her voice was quiet. "That I'll become part of your world and lose mine." He stepped forward, took her hand. "Then let's build a new one. Together." A pause. Then she laughed, not out of amusement, but disbelief. "You actually mean it, don't you?" "I do." She searched his face. "You're not just saying that because you can afford to move mountains. I'm saying it because you're the only thing that makes sense." The door opened behind them. The gallery owner poked her head in. "Arielle, we're ready." She turned back to him. I'll be here," he said. "Take your time." The showing went better than she could have imagined. Her paintings drew interest, conversation, and 2 more offers before the hour was out. But through it all, her eyes kept drifting back to the corner, where Jaxon stood with his hands in his pockets, watching her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. Later, after the crowd had thinned and the gallery lights dimmed, she joined him outside under the awning. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with its scent. "You remember when I told you I don't believe in fairy tales?" she said. "You didn't need to. You started writing your own." She looked up at him. "What if I said yes?" His brow lifted. "To what?" "To all of it. London. You. Us. I'd ask you to marry me?" Her breath caught. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She hesitated. But we haven't even. I'm not asking you to say yes tonight. I'm just telling you where this is going. I'm not looking for something temporary. I'm not interested in playing it safe. She exhaled slowly. You really know how to ruin a perfectly normal night. He leaned in, voice low. You don't want normal. No, she admitted. I don't. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a velvet box, not a ring, but something flatter. He opened it and held it out to her. Inside was a pendant, delicate and silver, shaped like an open sketchbook. The charm on one side was engraved with her initials. The other held a miniature skyline, New York on one side, London on the other. I had it made, he said. So you know there's always space for both of us. Her fingers brushed the edge of the charm. You think of everything. Only when it matters. She looked up, her eyes shining. I guess the guy who came in to pick up his dry cleaning really did fall for the girl behind the counter. His lips curved. Hard. She took a breath, then reached up and clasped the necklace around her neck. I'll go to London, she said. He stilled. You will? But not because I want to disappear into your world. I'll go because we can build something new with your world and mine side by side. His voice dropped. That's all I've ever wanted. Then ask me. He stepped closer, took both her hands. Arielle Hart, will you come with me and make a life that's ours? No matter where it starts. She didn't hesitate. Yes. He kissed her. This time, with no audience, no backdrop, no pressure. Just them. It was slow, certain, and full of the kind of promise that didn't need words. Months later, they stood in a sun-drenched studio overlooking the Thames. Her paintings lined the walls, half-finished and brilliant. He worked from a study down the hall, but he always started his mornings here, beside her, coffee in hand, watching her create. They never went back to the dry cleaner. But sometimes, when people asked how they met, he'd say, I went in for a press shirt, and came out with the love of my life. And she'd roll her eyes and kiss his cheek, but she never corrected him. Because some stories, the best ones, begin exactly where you least expect them. Arielle pressed her fingers into the clay, guiding the curve of the sculpture with quiet precision. The morning light poured into the studio, catching flecks of dust in the air. It was a new medium for her, something tactile, something that made her feel grounded. She didn't need to sell this one. It was for her. For them. Jaxon stepped inside without knocking, still in his white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. I didn't know you were finally starting it. She didn't look up. I couldn't sleep. Figured my hands might know what to do even if my head didn't. He crossed the room slowly, eyeing the rough silhouette forming beneath her palms. Is that us? Her shoulders shifted slightly. It's not supposed to be. But maybe. He reached out and gently wiped a dab of clay from her cheek. You always start with your hands. I start with my head. Maybe that's why we work. She set the sculpture aside and leaned back on her heels. You work because you think about everything. I work because I feel too much and have nowhere else to put it. He crouched beside her. You ever think that's the perfect balance? I used to think we were too different. Now I think maybe that's the point. Jaxon studied her face. I talked to the board this morning. Her expression shifted. Tell me. I told them I'm stepping back from daily operations. I'll still guide strategy. Still own it. But I'm not doing the constant travel, the 15-hour days, the meetings that drain the life out of me. She sat up straighter. You're serious? I am. I don't want to build a life I never have time to live. She searched his eyes. What changed? You did. You made me want something that doesn't come with a quarterly report. Her voice softened. I didn't ask you to give it all up. You didn't have to. I want to be present. I want to be here wherever here ends up being. London's fine. New York's fine. But only if we build it together. She was quiet for a long moment. Then we should choose a space that belongs to both of us. Not mine. Not yours. Ours. He nodded. There's an old print house in Shoreditch. Huge windows. Exposed brick. Needs work. Sounds perfect. I already put in an offer. She laughed. You did not. I did. But we can back out if you hate it. Her smile reached her eyes. I won't. He stood, then offered her his hand. Come with me. They walked through the narrow streets as the city stirred to life. The old print house stood at the edge of a quiet lane, ivy crawling over the iron gates, a faded sign still hanging above the door. Inside, it smelled like paper and ink and old wood, a history of creation embedded in the walls. She wandered through the open rooms, trailing her fingertips along the windowsills. It feels like it was waiting for someone to fill it again. He followed her slowly. It was waiting for you. She turned. And for you. They spent the next few weeks gutting the place. Not with contractors. Jaxon insisted on doing as much as they could themselves. He traded his cufflinks for a hammer, and she painted walls barefoot, singing under her breath with a brush between her teeth. They argued over lighting fixtures and made up while assembling bookshelves. The space transformed slowly, not into a showroom, but into something raw and warm and entirely theirs. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the light turned amber, he pulled her onto the rooftop. The city stretched around them, humming with life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, not flashy, not oversized. A vintage piece with a single sapphire set in a delicate gold band. I thought about waiting, he said, for the right moment. But then I realized. This is the right moment. There's nothing more perfect than this. You, me, the space we built with our own hands. She didn't move. Didn't blink. I want to wake up with you every day. I want to build a life that feels like art. Will you marry me, Arielle? She didn't speak. She threw her arms around him. Yes, she whispered against his neck. 1,000 times yes. They married 6 weeks later in the garden behind the studio. Sunlight filtered through the ivy-covered trellis as a string quartet began to play. There were no velvet ropes, no press, no seating charts with politicians and CEOs. Just close friends, a few artists, and the scent of lilacs in the air. Arielle wore a simple ivory dress with a low back and sleeves that fluttered in the breeze. Jaxon stood beneath the archway in a linen suit, no tie, eyes never leaving her as she walked toward him. I used to think I needed to hold the world in my hands, he said as they exchanged vows. But I only needed to hold yours. Her voice trembled, but her gaze never wavered. You saw me when I thought I was invisible. You made me believe in a version of myself I'd never dared to imagine. They kissed as the sun set, applause echoing around them. The party that followed was modest but full of warmth, candles and mason jars, handwritten notes instead of place cards, and dancing that lasted until the stars blanketed the sky. That night, they returned to the studio, shoes in hand, laughter still caught between them. They lay on the floor, watching the ceiling fan spin, her head on his chest and his fingers tangled in her hair. Do you think this is what forever feels like? She asked. He kissed the top of her head. No. This is what always should have felt like. Years passed. The studio became a landmark for emerging artists. Arielle mentored young creatives, never forgetting what it had meant to be seen. Jaxon launched a foundation that funded youth programs in underfunded schools, often showing up in jeans and rolled sleeves, always with paint on his hands. They traveled when they wanted. Stayed grounded when they needed. Their life was not perfect, but it was real. Balanced. Built with equal pieces of chaos and calm. And every time someone asked how they met, he'd say, "She gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost." She'd laugh and add, "And he never did pick up that tie." They never stopped creating. Never stopped choosing each other. And in the quiet, between the brushstrokes and brick walls and coffee shared at dawn, they found a love that didn't need to be explained. Only lived.